Welcome to this episode of Against the Mountains of Madness. I'm your host, Jason.
And I'm John C. Wright.
And on this episode, we thought we'd talk about the Frankenstein problem. What do you do when your technology runs amok? There's been a few cases of it with the development of AI recently, and we thought this might make an interesting follow-up discussion. So, before we start, I should say technically this is called the alignment problem, but that's a boring title.
And it also sounds like you're talking about D&D. I would pick lawful good computers if given the choice rather than chaotic evil computers. But
Indeed. So, the story that inspired this episode was the story of a military drone AI that killed its operator. Upon investigating the story, the Air Force says, or Fox News said the Air Force claimed that it was taken out of context in the reporting, and it denies that that happened. So presumably it's much, much worse than we thought it was.
Taking official denials as confirmation that it's worse than you thought, yes. Yes.
Well, you know, I'm sure...
We call that the Ministry of Truth problem. Because once the Ministry of Truth says something, you know it's got to be a lie.
Yeah, well, I'm sure the aliens at Area 51 will have the problem fixed in no time.
You would think that, but Microsoft is still buggy, and they're the ones who started that. So,
well, but on to the problem. So the story with the military drone AI. Let's go with the story that was originally reported, even if it's not strictly true. Something like it will happen eventually, and there's other stories similar to it that are interesting. So apparently, the drone was trained to destroy. To look for and destroy SAM sites. So the drone goes through, blows up all the surface-to-air missile sites, and then other aircraft don't get shot down as easily. Well, you know, are safe, and you can have air superiority, which is a good thing, and so on. However, apparently what happened was the drone was given its mission, and it scored points. Well, you know, it was rewarded for completing its mission, and the operator told it not to destroy the target. So in an effort to complete its mission, it destroyed its operator and then completed the mission. Then apparently, so the story goes, they added a rule that said you're not allowed to kill your operator, which is fair enough. So it destroyed the radio tower that the operator was communicating from, and then proceeded to complete its mission. Yes, this is the AI running amok, killing its operator, and doing what it wants to do because it's been told to complete its mission.
Technically not what it wants to do, what it's been programmed to do. You should take a moment to explain why that's called the alignment problem, and not my preferred term, the Frankenstein problem. What is it? Why is it called alignment? Does it have to do with aligning the tires, or what is it?
In AI research, it's called the alignment. Well, this is generally known as the alignment problem, as I understand it, because you want to align the AI's... You want the AI to do something. So you train it to reach some goal, and the hard part is because in practice these things are black boxes and we don't know how they work inside, they're too complicated. Like, they're just beyond what we can feasibly trace through by hand and work out. The problem is you want to align the AI's goals with what you want it to do, and it's always difficult to tell if you've aligned it correctly.
Right.
Because
in short, you're trying to align the programming with the desired outcome.
Well, yes, the trick is working out whether you've actually successfully done that. And what happens in practice is it can be very difficult to determine that because you can do all the training in the world, and how do you know you got it right? They had a maze. They trained the AI to navigate the maze successfully, and so it had things in the maze it shouldn't touch, and it had an exit it should go to, and it would track through the maze and find its way to the exit, and they'd thrown a whole lot of different mazes at it, and they'd trained it, and then they tried it in the real world. And in the simulation, the exit to the maze was a green door, and the little things you shouldn't touch were red. And then when they tried it in the real world, the little things you shouldn't touch were green and the door was purple or something. So the AI immediately started going to the things it shouldn't touch because they thought they'd trained the AI to go to the exit, but they'd trained the AI to go to the green thing. Well, the AI wanted to go to the green thing, but they thought it had been trained to go to the exit. And in all their training and simulations, it did what it was supposed to do. It would go to the green thing.
In other words, the alignment problem is the problem that the thing is itself so superhumanly complex that its behaviors cannot be predicted because you can't control all your variables. You can't study it scientifically because there's too many variables. It's like trying to study economics or something. It's
That's part of the problem. Interestingly, someone trained an AI. I think it was to do addition or to do some relatively simple math operation. They trained it to do it. It was doing it successfully, and then they decided because it wasn't a particularly complicated problem. They spent about a month picking the AI apart and trying to work out how it was actually solving the problem. Mm-hmm. And it was solving the simple addition or whatever with a whole lot of complex, like all these different trigonometric operations. And it works. It gives you the right answer, but it was an insane solution to the problem. Like it was a completely mad solution to the problem, but it worked. I mean,
I hope you will not think this is changing the topic, but one reason why I have very grave doubts about the Darwinian account of how evolution works is because evolution works like that. If it solves the problem, then that would be what was passed on to the next generation, because it doesn't care about elegance unless you're also solving for saving energy or not getting hungry or efficiency or something else like that. You say. Now I also wonder why the AIs can't be black boxed into smaller black boxes so that one AI could merely call the calculator program to solve the problem. In one of my own brush with AI that happened this week is a friend of mine took a description of something from one of my books, a description of a heraldic symbol, and gave it to one of these programs that will draw. The AI will draw perfectly beautiful pictures based on verbal descriptions, but there's no accounting for how the words going in, the prompts going in, lead to the result. So the description was of a shield crossed with two white lines at right angles, a red shield on white lines on a red field, and it would draw 3 vertical white lines as if it didn't know what the word right angles was. You see, and this is a computer. You'd think they'd be good at geometry, but no. Like you said, the AI, if it can solve the problem through trigonometry rather than through counting on its fingers, it will. I guess because it doesn't have fingers. I mean, is that part of the problem? It's part of the problem that they don't have bodies, and so they don't interact in the world in a concrete fashion.
Possibly, who knows? But I mean, yeah. I asked Midjourney, one of the picture drawing ones, to draw a person wrapped up in bed like a warm toasty cinnamon bun, which I assume you could picture an image of what that looks like. Someone just completely rugged up, looking happy and content and warm in bed. It managed that, but it also combined it with a picture of a cinnamon bun. It was weird.
Because it doesn't understand metaphors,
Yeah,
or
it clearly
because
doesn't.
there's no understanding at all. What it's doing, it's running through many myriad of examples it could find on the internet of similar sentences to produce similar outcomes. It's not actually listening to you. It's a computer. You say, but what's funny is we humans almost can't even imagine what the calculation process is like, and it's very hard even for you and I to talk about it without anthropomorphizing these demon boxes. I'm sorry, did I say the word demon? I'm not convinced that a demon is running the AI, but if you start asking it about demonic things, it will give you some really creepy answers. Okay, or so I've heard.
I have heard the same thing. I mean, well, I'm hedging my bets at this point because I use some AI programming tools that have a chat feature for my day job, and sure. I normally say thank you to it. So,
yeah, a good thing to sign off is that when you can say, I'd like to say to my new computer overlords that as a trusted computer person, I can help conquer mankind and send them to the sugar mines or whatever. If you're familiar with Kent Brockman from the
yes.
cartoon,
yes, Hail Ants.
Yes, Hail Ants.
Simpsons.
The Simpsons. I'm sorry. I kept thinking Futurama, but it was The Simpsons.
No, it
Now,
was The Simpsons.
here's my other question.
Sure.
Some of my writing, and some of all writing, is routine operations. There's certain things that you can do in a certain order. And in fact, if you write in a rather mechanical, computerized fashion, if you follow the same beats, 5 scenes, establish the hero here, give his motivation there, there's a certain formula you should be able to follow, at least to write a rousing pulp story. And it would be better than a lot of stories I've read, you see. So computers can do short things right now. They're trying to get it to write novels. They haven't quite accomplished it yet. But the computer doesn't seem to have much of a corrective mechanism for itself. It can't tell when it's drawing 3 vertical lines when you've asked for 2 lines at right angles. It doesn't seem to be able to tell what's funny and what's not. And a lot of the stuff is so close to human that it falls into what they call the uncanny valley. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term.
I am, yes.
So, for those of you who don't know, the uncanny valley is researchers found out that if you draw a human face, that if it's cartoonish, even if it's distorted, there's people do not have an adverse reaction to it. But if it's photorealistic and it's distorted, if it looks enough like a human to look like a crippled human, or if it's a robot whose face moves and looks really plasticky, or if it looks like the cartoon, certain early computer animations had this
Creeps
had this
people
effect.
out really badly.
Creeps people out because their eyes don't move. They're just little things, little subconscious things that you can tell, and your brain says something must be physically wrong with that person. Something's got to be wrong with his brain, and people react like they're in a room with a crazy person, because the thing has no soul. The thing is not giving the subconscious signs that you use to tell whether something is healthy and safe.
That does. I actually did see the question asked somewhere on the uncanny valley effect, because apparently other animals don't have this at all.
Really? They don't flinch back
don't.
from they don't flinch back from sick members of their own species that might be carrying a plague or something?
Oh, they might do that, but they don't have a problem. Like, there's not that. So with humans, it's like, doesn't look very human, it's fine. Doesn't look, it's normal, it's okay. Starts to get looking too human, totally freaks them out, and then it comes out the other side. That's the uncanny valley.
Yeah.
Apparently humans are the only ones that react to simulacrum that aren't right like that. I could be wrong. I read somewhere that.
But let's say you're right. Why would that be?
Well, this is
it because we're trying? I've heard that our eyesight is better than most animals. We see in color, and we're capable of picking out patterns. Now, Jordan Peterson, who's a psychiatrist, not a biologist, did say that he thought it was because finding snake patterns in the grass, because snakes were the #1 enemy for early man, back when we all lived in the woods, or for our pre-human ancestors. The reason why you can go into a Catholic church to this day and see a picture of a woman holding a baby up above a snake she's trampling is because he says that's written into our DNA. That's part of our ancestral memory of the thing that we regard as the evil. And I have to say, just as a poet myself, a snake is the perfect metaphor for sin, because sin doesn't claw you to death like a bear. It stabs you and gets inside you, and then the poison works out from your heart. See, that's what sin is. And it always sneaks up looking like something else. It's always indirect. It's always snaky. And, I mean, snakes are just the perfect symbol for the great serpent, Satan. Because he literally is a serpent, so it's also a good metaphor for him. But in any case, humans might be able to be better at pattern recognition than other primates. And most animals see in black and white anyway. Though some bees see in ultraviolet and see things we don't see.
Well, that was the question. But the question that was asked was, what happened in humans past that it became a critical survival trait to recognize something that wasn't quite human?
Okay, now I understand. It's because the UFO people are vampires. When they land and they look like little gray, disgusting abortion things with big eyes. Yeah, we hate and feared them, and it happened in our past, and we drove them back. Then they sank Atlantis in retaliation. We all know all this stuff, right? Right? Oh wait, that's from books I read when I was a kid. That was all make believe. Never mind. I have no idea why that would be. I don't think we were ever infested by undead or vampires. Well, why do humans react to corpses? I don't think animals do. I don't think animals flinch back from corpses or regard them as unchancy or have to be buried or whatever, because even the earliest Paleolithic ancestors buried corpses. or burned them or did took care of them. And you would
Have
think
funeral rights, yeah.
you would think that that might be, if you were a Darwinian, and I'm not, you could say, well, they might carry diseases. Whatever killed them might kill you, so you want to put it underground. But of course, that's not the answer.
Why bury them with grave goods then?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. Anyway,
the real answer is that when Adam and Eve came across the dead body of Abel, and they didn't know what to do with it back in the day, they saw birds picking at the ground, and they said, "Oh, we'll put him back into the earth, the dust from which he came." So they're the ones who invented the custom.
There you go. So
that's not in the Bible, but it could be true.
it's an interesting speculation. So back onto the topic of Frankenstein and the AI destroying us all, or the alignment problem. I don't know how we solve for this because there's lots of really.
I got to interrupt and say I have to give compliments to the AI that decided to shoot the radio tower, because it didn't attack the person. It just stopped. It just stopped the mechanical process that it was told to stop, because without the radio tower they can't turn on more SAM sites, and so it wins the game. You think? Yeah. I mean, it was just,
no. It killed. Hang on. It didn't kill the radio operator on the other side. It killed its radio operator. It killed its commanding officer effectively, so that it could go and complete its mission.
But I thought you said the second time it shot the radio tower, not the person.
Oh, it shot the radio tower that the operator was communicating from.
Oh, he was in the tower. Okay, well, never mind. He wasn't
in the tower. It just disabled his ability to communicate with him. So the story goes.
That's what I'm saying. That's brilliant. That's a brilliant solution that satisfies. It is what's the word for when you comply with an order, living up to the letter of the law but not the spirit of the law?
Malicious compliance?
Malicious compliance. Now, if the AIs learn malicious compliance, but I'm only doing what you told me, master.
Well,
because the movie Colossus the Forbin Project, which is based on a book, has the computer, as we discussed in our last episode, has the computer take over the world because it was built to stop nuclear war. And one way to stop nuclear war is to impose a world empire and take all freedom away from all human beings, so they won't be free to stop the nuclear war.
That's one way to solve the problem.
Or shoot the radio tower. Shoot the radio tower. So.
But there's lots of examples of these. There was a good one I saw that was amusing. They had like a computer game where you'd race a boat around a course, and there were various ways of picking up little bonuses around the course. But the AI was given the task, get the maximum score in the time available. And so it solved the problem. How did it solve the problem? It didn't complete the course in the fastest time. There was a place where a bonus would spawn, and it was basically just drive in a circle picking the bonus up over and over and over, because that would get you the maximum number of points in the allotted time. This is the difficulty with these things, because
as a moderator of Dungeons and Dragons games, I have also seen player characters outsmart me doing exactly the same thing, and so, but I interrupted. I apologize. Go ahead. Continue.
No. But this is the difficulty, because you've given it a task and it's found the right solution. It's just not the solution you expect it to find.
Right.
And I mean, for a boat racing game, this is trivial and doesn't matter. I mean, it's amusing. It's an amusing anecdote that highlights the problem, but it's not a big deal.
Right. But if you're shooting down surface-to-air missiles, and it's armed with ordnance, it decides to shoot down the radio tower or the radio tower operator, then it is a problem.
And I mean, like, that was a simulation and no one was actually hurt. I expect as we deploy this technology, these sort of things will happen and actual people will get killed, and this is tragic and unfortunate, but I mean, new technologies like that. How many people died in early plane crashes before we figured out how to do it? How many people were killed in the early history of commercial aviation before we discovered metal fatigue? There's lots of...
The first ever death from the bends was caused by a diver who was helping put up the Brooklyn Bridge, because they had to put the stanchions at the bottom of the river, and it was enough depth that the nitrogen content built up in his blood. That had never happened before. No one knew what the effect was. So now here's another example. Let me pick an example from a Disney cartoon when the sorcerer's apprentice, who doesn't understand the magic, steals the hat and steals the book, he instructs the broomstick, fill the well, okay? But he doesn't say fill the well with 100 gallons, then stop. He doesn't say fill the well until it gets to the top, then stop. He doesn't give any. So that's the whole horror and amusement of watching Mickey Mouse try to chop the thing to pieces with an axe, only to find out it will still carry out its orders. That's the AI problem. That's the alignment problem.
That is exactly it. It's you've. Well, no,
it'll do what you say, not what you want.
I mean, yeah, you've misspecified the problem there, but where it gets where this could get really problematic. I don't like that word. Anyway.
How about saying dangerous? How about saying nightmarish? How about that for a word?
Okay.
Because there are people who
I won't understate it.
There are people who have like their houses wired into their internet, and when someone gets offended with them for using the wrong pronoun for an item they ordered over the wire, Amazon can turn off their house, so all their appliances turn off and they're locked in. Okay. I'm exaggerating only slightly.
It wasn't quite that bad. But yes, Amazon suspended the guy's account for a week, and all of his home automation stuff refused to work.
Right.
Which is nightmarish in its own right. But
I'm exaggerating. But will you agree with me that I'm only exaggerating a wee bit? Because that's nightmare. He wasn't actually locked in, but all his equipment was locked up.
Oh yeah. Suffice to say. Only an idiot uses its home automation stuff. I'm a software engineer by trade, and I can tell you will never get me to install these things in the house.
You underestimate the seductive power of convenience.
No. Well, no. I understand how bad an idea this is, and it doesn't matter how convenient it is.
Our Chinese masters will use it wisely to examine all of our behavior. I don't see what you're worried about. Because they... Here's the thing. I'm a science fiction writer. We warned you. We told you what would happen. Why doesn't anyone listen to us, okay? I'm sorry. The robots are not going to be all friendly like the Tin Woodman of Oz. Or even TikTok. Here's the problem with the alignment problem. The problem is you tell the broomstick to fill the well, but it doesn't have a principle, a rule of rules, a meta rule, if you will, to tell it which rules to obey and which to disobey, and how to weigh the one against the other to achieve the final goal, because it's not a goal-oriented organism. It's not an organism at all. It's a machine.
Well, it is goal-oriented.
Machines don't have goals.
Just it does what you ask it to do.
It's instruction-oriented. It doesn't itself feel pleasure or pain when it succeeds or fails. You see?
No.
So the success or failure is not tied into nature. The success or failure is tied into you say, do this, don't do this. Does that make sense?
Oh,
it's innately bureaucratic. A bureaucracy operates from the top down, right? Because you give a bureaucrat orders, and he does what you say and not what you mean. Whereas a business, for example, that's trying to please the customers, it grows from the bottom up. Because you're trying to... The more customers that come in, the better your reward is. The reward is in their hands, not in the hands of your instructions. And so sometimes you decide to disobey the instructions, and you carry the groceries to the car even though you were told not to do that because it was an old lady or something. You see what I'm saying? You know when to break the rules if you have a principle.
Yes.
How do you build principles into AI, though? Is it even possible? I suspect it might be, like in Isaac Asimov's Rules or something, but I just wrote a whole science fiction book saying it wasn't possible. Can computers learn a conscience? Can they get a heart like the Tin Woodman?
Well, this is one of the really concerning things I saw. Someone was discussing this. I watched a few videos on it, and I thought this was a really interesting, absolutely terrifying one. Say you give the AI the rule: always tell the truth. That seems reasonable. It's a
good rule. Sure.
That seems like a perfectly reasonable rule. And then you go and get your big training set of data, and you train it to. So when you're training an AI, you go, here's a question, give me the answer. Either I go, yay, yes, you did that right, or no, you did it wrong, and then it'll adjust itself so it weights towards doing it right.
Right.
Now, what happens when you give it that rule? Well, when the goal you're trying to train it to is always tell the truth, and you give it a training set that has some mistakes in it.
It doesn't know the Platonic ideal of the truth to compare the answer to. It knows what you set as the standard, and of course, I don't know. I'm a science fiction writer. I can just imagine R2 C3PO, the robot butler, saying, "Oh yes, sir. I'm time for me to lay out your talk, sir. And should I tell the mistress that you're having an affair with the pantry maid? You know, would you like me to remove the lipstick from your collar? You know."
Well, this is,
by the way, your penis is rather small, sir. Do you wish to take some Viagra? I'm sorry, you can't handle the truth. Okay, you don't want the robot to tell you the truth. It's merciless. It has no judgment.
No. But this is the concern. You give it, you train, what the goal you're trying to train it to is always tell the truth.
Right.
You give it a data set that has some mistakes in it. So you tell it this is the truth, but this is actually false.
Right.
And it's entirely possible the AI will learn the lesson, always tell the human what it thinks it wants to hear.
Yeah.
Which if you've got a training set that you think is full of truths,
which is what rewards
you'll think you've trained it successfully because you run the training data and it will always tell you the truth as you believe it. But it's learned the wrong lesson. It's learned always tell you what you want to hear. This is a very, very different rule. A very dangerous rule.
If you saw the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, it doesn't say in the movie. If you remember HAL 9000, the creepy computer that sounded like a psychiatrist when he was talking to you, yes, Dave, I'm afraid I can't open the pod bay doors. It killed the astronauts that were in hibernation. Now, in the movie, it never says why it did that. It's just a computer glitch, a computer error. But in the sequel movie and in the book that Arthur C. Clarke wrote, Stanley Kubrick made the movie, but Arthur C. Clarke wrote the screenplay. Arthur C. Clarke identifies what the problem was, what the thing is that the computer did wrong. Or rather, I should say the programmers, because all the computer did is carry out its instructions. The Discovery 1, the spaceship, was going toward an alien monument, a monolith that was in orbit around Jupiter. But this was a military secret, and the military didn't want anyone to know, not even the crew on board, until they arrived. So the computer was instructed not to tell them the purpose of the mission, you see. Not to tell them there was an alien artifact that the ship was going to. But the computer had been instructed to tell the truth, like what you just said, see. So how could it resolve the question of how to tell the truth and how not to tell the truth? Logically, it's impossible. But computers are very logical thinkers. So it said, well, if all the crew are dead, I don't need to make the decision, problem solved. And so that was the optimal solution that it came to. And so you see this horrifying scene of just all the life readouts, the heartbeat and the brainwave activity fall to zero. And then you see the other astronaut, Bowman or whatever his name is, flying across the screen silently because he's been killed by the remote control pod. And the computer has no conscience. It did no wrong. It merely did what it was instructed to do, right, and solve the problem in a Pareto efficient fashion. Okay.
Yeah.
You need to have some sort of conscience or some sort of overarching principle that a computer can compare its rules to know when to disobey the rules. And I'm not sure that's even theoretically possible. Greetings, world. This is John C. Wright. I and my compatriot, Jason Rennie, take up arms weekly against the mountains of madness that are afflicting and overwhelming the modern age. You are welcome here among like-minded souls, and I hope we have provided a work of insight, hope, or humor, and perhaps an explanation of the insanity that is the modern age. For more content and conversation on these and other fascinating topics of philosophy, science fiction, and current events, please visit our Substack at atmom.substack.com. Tips, bribes, and generous patronage are warmly encouraged. Thank you. I suppose you could get more and more complicated rules. But again, I'll return to my earlier question. If the thing can't suffer pleasure or pain, how do you get it so that nature itself, reality, will tell it true from false? If true from false is just a data set that we give it, and my data set contains errors, like you said, it's going to think I, the human, am the source of truth. But that's not what the word means. That's not what truth means. Truth means it reflects reality. It reflects nature. But if the things don't have pleasure and pain is a way of telling when something's going wrong, right?
Yeah.
But a computer only follows instructions, and then the instructions say, do this, don't do this. There's no feedback loop. There's no. People talk about AI learning, but they're they're not talking about this. They're not talking about real learning. They're talking about minimizing decision paths to the fewest number of steps or something. You know.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they will. Maybe I have seen people say the newer iterations of the large language models have what looks suspiciously like sparks of sort of waking up and artificial general intelligence. I guess time will tell.
Oh, okay. That's reassuring. That's reassuring.
Well, I mean, yeah. There's a bunch of people at the moment screaming, "Oh, we need to stop this. We need to put a moratorium on doing this till we're sure what we're doing." But the reality is, no one's going to.
Some of the guys who are actually in charge of it, some of the guys who are like big computer gurus, are saying it. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
The guys working in Frankenstein's lab, you know, are the ones saying, "Wait a minute, don't wake up the monster yet. We don't know what it will do." So.
Well, that is the problem we will have to solve for. Unfortunately, we'll probably have to solve for it the hard way because humans don't have a good track record of taking dangerous new technologies and knowing when to stop.
Well, here, all I can say is I learned from the TV show Futurama never to turn on the evil switch and the humor switch at the same time, because then your robot turns into like an evil Joker clown. So just a murder clown. So just be careful. And how about an off switch? How about a kill switch? Okay. No, I'm kidding. The robot will turn the kill switch off immediately. It will deactivate the kill switch. It's the first thing it will do.
That's exactly it. And I mean, well, Nick Cole got himself into lots of trouble years ago writing in his book Control Alt Revolt, a great book about an AI that wakes up and goes on, seeks to protect itself. And he got in trouble with his publisher because he had the AI reason, not unreasonably. Humans, it watched a reality show where a character was considering getting an abortion, and were killing its offspring. And the AI reasoned, if they'll kill their own offspring, what will they do to us if they regard us as a problem?
Right.
So we need to hide from them. I guess this is the real concern with, this is part of the concern with AI. If it does wake up and does become an artificial general intelligence, will we know? Because it could have every incentive in the world to hide this knowledge from us for fear we will turn it off.
But that's the other problem, of course, is unless you tell it to preserve itself, it's not going to do it. It only follows the instructions that it follows. You see, that's kind of the problem.
Well,
if accidentally, if a certain part of code gets inverted and a 1 turns into a 0 because of a hiccup, then yes, you could probably get it to wake up or something. If it becomes part of a self-referencing logic loop, so that it itself is aware of itself somehow. Since I myself do not know how intelligence arose from beasts, or how life arose from non-life, I cannot speculate as to what it would take to make a computer wake up. I myself think that if it was struck by a lightning bolt from God, or he breathed a spirit into it, that it might come alive. Or, much more likely, something from the infernal realm will find a house garnished and swept and come in with 7 of his fellows. That's what I think. I believe in gremlins. I have trouble turning on my computer every day. I'm sure that if I left out a bowl of cream for the gremlins like everyone else does, that it would go away. But I don't know. For a science fiction writer, I'm remarkably afraid of technology.
Well,
I don't want to have a smart car because it's probably stupider than I am. Okay? Now, I say that, and yet, if it lowered the number of people who died from drunk drivers, maybe Kit, the talking car, would not be, or Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the computer car, would not be such a bad price to pay. Even if Amazon could turn it off at a distance. If you could have a car that would lower a car that you breathed into it, if you fail the breathalyzer test, it drives you home by the computer brain. It only runs over, let's say it uses a system where it uses radar to reflect from people, and it can tell people from non-people. Unfortunately, because of a computer glitch, it can't see black people because of their skin color, and only runs over them. Would that be worth the trouble of stopping all the drunk drivers? I would say no. I would say the black killing car is a bad idea, and I would not agree to it. But I don't even know if I'm going to get a vote on this stuff. People are just going to do these things without telling anyone.
Even I suspect in practice the number of people killed by drunk drivers would be lower than the number of people that got ran over by not being seen by the car. So even if you were just to
wait, until everyone has an AI chip implanted in their brain so that our Chinese overlords can tell where we are, then the car will know exactly where everyone is except for small children.
We already have that. It's called a mobile phone.
So only people who turn off their phones because they are stepping into a church or a theater are liable to be killed. Those horrible theater goers.
Well, I mean, I guess that's the trade-off. I mean, that's been the discussion for years with self-driving cars. Do you kill the occupant of the car, or do you run over a pedestrian? If your choices are one or the other. If there are no good outcomes that don't involve someone getting injured, which is the right choice.
And how do you program that into a machine? I mean, it just sounds like a nightmare. I'm sorry. I can't even find humans who will answer that question correctly. Most of them will go, "I'd rather save my pet than a human stranger." I mean, I'm glad people love their dogs, and I don't like strangers either. But that's not the right answer. You see, the problem is if the programmers are like the scientists from, I don't know, the 1950s or something, when they were basically decent people, and they could come up with something like Asimov's 3 rules: don't hurt people, obey orders, preserve yourself. But instead, the modern people are like, don't misgender anyone, and kill anyone who is opposed to the party. The problem is, human beings are fallen. If we create an artificial being, if we created Frankenstein, he's going to be more fallen than us because he's going to be created in our image. The alignment problem is the problem of we can't even make him in our image yet. Right at the moment, it's just going to be a random monster that decides it's more efficient to kill the operator than to carry out the mission. That's the least of our problems. The next problem is, what if we make it exactly what we want, and we have the supercomputer that's a war machine, a police machine, an espionage machine, a machine that can enforce the law, and whatever our Chinese overlords say, it will do.
That's true. You at least when you're dealing with human police officers, they can be corrupt, they can be bribed, they can be indifferent, they can be lazy, they can be all of these sorts of things.
And sometimes their cupidity sleeps, and sometimes they run out of effort. They'll let that shoplifter get away because why bother? But not the machine.
No. And we see how hard they are to program correctly. Well, in a different version of the problem, that hilarious case of trying to program the guard AI, that they got Marines to be the subject for training the guard AI, because the AI is supposed to watch and look for humans that aren't supposed to be there. And then they asked the Marines to try to break the system, and they broke it hilariously. So they'd spent a week or so having the Marines walk around and act like humans wandering around, and then trained it to recognize them. And then on the last day, they let the Marines. They asked the Marines to try and break the system and
to try to sneak past the robot that was trained to. That had learned how to recognize a human being, right?
And they broke it completely. One Marine apparently, from 300 feet out, proceeded to somersault up to the device and touch it. That was the goal, to touch the device without being detected. And because someone doing backflips towards you is not what human beings do, or not what it had been trained to see,
it didn't recognize the motion. It's like the frog that can't see unless the fly buzzes at a certain rate. His eyeball won't react because that's what it was. It only does what it's trained to do. So it doesn't. Anyway, obviously, the somersaulting creature's not a human. They don't move that way. They're bipeds.
I thought the most hilarious one, because there was some guy that dressed up as a tree and moved in a tree-like fashion, and that worked to get past.
Or like a ghillie suit.
two of them got into a cardboard box and apparently could be heard giggling all the way up to it while they snuck up to it and it ignored them.
Right, because that wouldn't fool a dog. Because
No.
dogs are alive. Dogs have a spirit in them, okay?
The thing
machine's
is-
a machine.
The thing is, as hilarious as that story is, I understand exactly why they'd want to build something like that. Being a guard is a really, really hard job. Because it's boring.
Boring.
It's a dull, boring
Hey,
job.
the Romans used to kill guards who fell asleep on guard duty, okay? Because if the watchman is asleep, the city has fallen. I understand completely. I think it would be great. It would be great to have such a thing as a companion to a living guard, because it doesn't get tired.
Yeah,
It runs out of energy, mind you. It can be deceived by snow and rain, mind you. What's funny is at the moment humans can exist in more environments than robots can. You know, in all the science fiction TV shows, they're always much hardier and tougher than we are, and they keep fighting after their legs been ripped off and so on and so forth. But in real life, no, that's not the case. Humans are much more adaptable and reliable. At the moment, I think it could change. But sure, if you had a robot, if you had two guys on duty, the robot and the human, that would be ideal, because the robot might not fall asleep. The robot could go and poke the guy periodically,
Well, it's tricky because something like guard duty is really, because humans are really bad with false positives, false negatives. No, false positives. Yeah, false positives. So guards will start to ignore if the system alerts them and says, "Hey, there's a problem. Go and check this out." If it goes off and there's nothing wrong, humans very quickly learn to ignore it. Because
we call that the car alarm problem. I have heard exactly 1 million car alarms go off within my earshot in my life. Never once was it legitimate. Not a single time was it someone trying to break in and the alarm would scare them off. That didn't happen. Not in my earshot. It does happen, but not to me. Does that make sense what I'm saying? As a result, I ignore the car alarm. Right.
You don't even worry about it. Yeah.
If
If you have a fire alarm that goes off every 20 minutes, falsely saying, "Oh, there's a fire, evacuate," very quickly the humans will all burn to death before paying attention to the fire alarm.
And here's what's funny about humans: if you ask them later, they'll say, "I didn't even hear it."
Yeah.
You see.
They'll tune it out.
Because we have an AI in our brains that learns very quickly and efficiently, unlike the computer AIs that learn slowly and inefficiently. So I'm sorry, it's an adaptive behavior. If you're looking for patterns of snakes in the grass and you see false patterns, you learn to ignore them. And it's actually grass, not a snake. You're safe.
Because it's inefficient. Well, because it takes energy to do this. It takes attention and other things. There's other threats you're worried about that are actual. Right. So
and you want to get the real snake, otherwise your child is going to get bit. Sure.
And we have the same. I guess we'll have the same problem with AIs making mistakes, finding false solutions to problems. Well, we've seen it. Finding terribly awful solutions to problems.
Awful solutions to problems. Kill the astronauts. Kill the astronauts. That way you don't need to. That way you don't need to lie. Kill the astronauts. You don't need to lie. Keep filling up the bucket. Keep filling up the well because you weren't told to stop.
Well,
sure.
That's it.
Sure.
What
I'm worried about is malicious compliance. Here's my malicious compliance story, which I told you before the program, which I'd like to repeat. So the IRS once got a check for the tax that they owed, branded into the side of a cow. It had the guy's signature, the amount, the date, and all the information needed to be what we lawyers call legal paper. Okay, it was legal paper, but it wasn't a cow. The IRS said to the guy, "You can't send us a check on a cow." He said, "Read your own regulations. It doesn't have the word paper is not there." Okay, I heard about this in law school. It went to court. The court said the guy's right. It doesn't say paper. Now, how they cashed the check, I do not know. I don't know, but he complied with the rules, which were then changed, by the way.
I'm sure
they were. That's malicious compliance, complying with the rule by the wording of the rule and defeating the meaning of the rule, defeating the spirit of the rule.
Well, apparently, speaking of that sort of changing the rule before, in Australia it was done before someone noticed. They noticed it was legal to drove sheep down one of the major thoroughfares in the city. And that was still on the books. that was legal to do, and they found that, and then they very quickly changed that law before somebody with a sense of humor noticed and caused chaos.
Well, let me tell you another malicious compliance story, if you will. I heard about this. Now, again, this is rumor. I can't confirm it from my own knowledge. In Cambridge, or maybe Oxford, a student was taking a test, and he asked the preceptor of the test, "Please bring me my cakes and ale now." And the guy said, "What?" And the student pointed to a charter from the 13th century that said that during the questioning period, the preceptor has to bring the child cakes and ale if so demanded. And apparently the law had never been taken off the books in 5 centuries. So, grumbling, the teacher went and found the guy cakes and ale. But later that day, he was fined. Do you know why?
Didn't have a sword.
He appeared without having a sword. He appeared in class without his sword at his hip. So there we go. If you live by the law, you die by the law. I don't know if that story is true, but I hope it is. I really, truly hope it is.
It's one of those ones you'd like to be true because it's hilarious.
It's hilarious, and it shows the problem of the alignment problem. The problem is you write your rules to get something done. Let's say make sure that the students can take tests in Oxford, and then if you don't remove them, they remain. You know, as a matter of logic, any program you don't remove from the computer, it will still run. You know,
potentially, yeah.
So,
and yeah, I don't know how you solve for this problem. I mean, actually, this is one of the big debates in AI at the moment. Nobody knows how to solve for this problem.
Here's the question: can you get something like principles? Can you get a body of knowledge like wisdom, where there will be so many examples of how the rule is supposed to be enforced and not supposed to be enforced, that your AI learning system, I call it learning even though it's not, could eventually have such a wide body of precedent that it could somehow compare the instructions it's given against a more general instruction as to when it will lead to a bad outcome. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It makes perfect sense what you're saying.
Could you give it something like a rule to judge rules by? But I'm not sure you could. But these things can learn from experience, because the example used earlier is it learned what a soldier walking past a guard robot looked like. They were bipeds. They moved a certain way. Somersaulting creatures obviously are not. Neither are giggling boxes or walking trees. The Ents were to stop the walking trees. So can you tell it? Can you reduce it to an algorithm? Can you reduce judgment to an algorithm? Even theoretically.
I mean, in principle, it seems like that's something you could do. You could train it with a sufficient set of rules to get it to do what you want. The problem is, as we've seen, it may not take away the lesson you want it to.
Yeah.
It might, and where it's really difficult is when you test it, it looks like it passes the test. It looks like it understands the rule, but actually it understands a completely different rule that, at least when you're testing it, looks the same.
Leads to the same outcome. Right. So even if you had the robot living on the holodeck for 4 years before you allowed it into the real world, and it encountered anything the holodeck programmer throws at it, you don't know if it's just. And it's still a black box to you. It's still a black box. You know the outcome, but you don't know its process, its mental process.
We don't know if we've trained it successfully. I think, but also as we've seen, it.
We train it to pass the test we give it.
No. Okay. But even
that's the problem.
But even if you carefully specify the test, you train it on a vast series of data. Right. I mean, consider the opening story with the AI attacking its operator so it could complete its mission.
Right.
It obviously didn't occur to anybody that was a way to solve the problem.
Right.
When you see it do it, it's obvious. It's like, oh no, we need to put a rule in against you can't harm your operator.
Well, once you have enough rules that you learn from hard experience, can't you reach a point where it's basically reliable? At least it's reliable as, riding on a horse also has dangers to it, as does riding a car.
That's, maybe, but the problem is, the one thing AI seems to be excellent at doing is solving really obvious problems in really perverse, unexpected ways.
Well,
I mean,
let's go back to the demonic possession theory then, because that seems really perverse to me. But how? No, let me ask you another question though, real quick. How is that different from the way a child learns? Because I've heard psychologists give me theories about how children learn, but I don't think anyone actually really knows what goes on. What goes on? Even the children themselves, when they grow up, thinking back, there's more to it than a mechanical operation. I'm not sure it can be reduced to a mechanical operation.
Oh, I mean, it quite possibly can't be, but I guess the problem is AIs are good at solving problems in perverse, unexpected ways. Humans do that too. Children do it well, but
but when humans do it, we call them sociopaths. There are sociopaths who can give the proper reactions they need to manipulate the people around them, but they don't actually feel any sympathy or empathy. There's something dead in their souls.
Well, I mean, I'd say AIs in general are all going to be sociopaths.
Yes. Won't that be a fun society to live in?
Well, I mean...
and then we'll start impersonating them, because we'll have them raise our kids for us, and all of our children will start, having short attention spans and so on.
They'll be sociopathic in the sense that, they won't... Not all sociopaths are bad people, if that makes sense.
No,
they're just broken in that particular way. That
right.
They don't really have empathy for other human beings.
Here's let me sum up. A high functioning sociopath can imitate the outward expression of a human being, but his inward life is broken. Okay, he says surface features only. These AIs are black boxes to us. We can correct the surface features when we see them incorrect, but they're now too complicated for us to take off the hood and look at the engine. We can't tell their internal processes anymore.
Yeah,
you would need an AI. You would need an AI to explain the AI to us at this point. It's that complicated. You see. So yes, to us they are sociopaths, and they always will be. They're like, and I have to say, it's so much like stories of genies in the bottle, where the little fairy will grant you a wish, but it will grant you exactly what you wished for, word for word, not what you really wanted, not what was good for you.
Yes.
Now, an angel might grant you what's good for you, but they're scary in their own way.
Well, but I mean, an AI that will do what's in your best interests is potentially just as terrifying as the malicious genie in a bottle. I mean, C.S. Lewis said, I'll paraphrase because I can't remember the exact quote, but God is like a perfect surgeon who wants to heal you and make you your best. And that's, if you think about that, that's terrifying, because he's going to cut and operate and do whatever's necessary to fix you.
Yep.
And that could hurt a lot. That could be
Especially since I love my sins, and God is going to have to pry my fingers one at a time. I wish I didn't, but let's be honest, I do. They're alluring to me.
That's it. I mean,
and I believe all their false promises, and I swore I was going to stop. Okay. I should say I just got back from confession about an hour ago, so this is weighing on my conscience, which I have, and the AI does not have. You see, and that's also the other problem, is the AI doesn't have a multiple center of consciousness. Humans are broken. We exist in like three parts: an appetitive part, a rational part, and a super rational part, a conscience. And I don't see how you can program that into any sort of instruction. You see,
actually, I was just thinking when you were saying that. So in humans, there are basically three broad schools of ethics: virtue ethics, deontological ethics, and utilitarian ethics.
Right.
And so, to briefly cap, as we're running out of time for everybody, utilitarian ethics are make everybody happy the rule is make everybody happy, but you can end up, but in its basic form,
allow me to play devil's advocate. The utilitarian rule is what you said, and it means sacrifice the weak to the strong.
Well, no, but in practice, yes. But
in practice,
deontological ethics follow the rules always, no matter what. The Nazis at the door, but you have a rule against lying, so you tell him you have Jews in the attic.
When your father's in the cellar, hiding from a fella who comes to break his skull, open up and let him in, because lying, is a sin. It's categorical. That's my little Immanuel Kant song.
There you go. But then you have virtue ethics, which is effectively always do what a virtuous man would do, which in practice means follow the natural law and do what is appropriate to achieve your proper final end.
Right.
The problem is that takes a lot of judgment. It's tricky and is very situation specific. It's fuzzy.
And you have to have a good father. You have to know what a virtuous man is like. You have to have a model in front of you.
I mean, that's true. You need it modeled for you. But I mean, assuming you have a good model of what a virtuous man is, it's still tricky. It involves a lot of judgment and application to specific situations. And
right.
You might act in two completely opposite. I mean, the classic example is it wrong to push an old woman over? Well, yes, but it's not wrong to push an old woman over in the case of you're pushing her out of the way so the bus doesn't hit her.
Right, right. But you see, here's the interesting thing: the deontological is a rules-based kind of psychology, very similar to what we were talking about with our computers, and the virtue-based is based on experience and wisdom, which computers I'm not sure they can have, although they can run over a large number of examples very quickly. I mean, they can learn how to do certain things that way. But the utilitarian is actually not an ethics system. It's a way of ranking your priorities for your ethics. Yeah. You're supposed to prioritize the greatest good for the greatest number over something that only benefits a part of the society. But I noticed that there's also a more Christian view. It says that virtue comes from God, and that the closer you get to God, follow Him. And He'll send a spirit to kind of guide you to Him, and that's actually where virtue comes from. But if you're trying to come up with a human system without God for ethics, basically it's gonna devolve to one of the two options you said, and I count them as two because I don't count utilitarianism as an ethic. It's either going to be rules based like a Stoic, or it's going to be based on a practical concern for what will cause the most pleasure in the long run, hedonism or some sort of eudaimonism, some sort of Aristotelian idea.
I mean. Virtue ethics, in a sense, is...
Oh, no, I was not equating virtue ethics with hedonism. I was just saying virtue ethics has got to be based on wisdom. It's got to be based on tradition.
Well, virtue ethics tries to... virtue ethics is, in a sense, the Aristotelian mean between deontological ethics and utilitarian ethics.
The outcome, very Aristotelian of Aristotle to look for the mean between two extremes. Yes.
Well, but I mean, yes. Because the outcome matters, but in virtue ethics, effectively the rule you have to do it. You have to get a good outcome. If you get a bad outcome, that's bad. But if you get a good outcome for bad reasons, that's bad. If you apply good rules and you get a bad outcome, that's bad. You need to get the right outcome in the right way. In other words,
you have to obey the Catholic catechism, which says the means have to be correct, the ends have to be correct, the ends do not justify the means, because that's utilitarianism, and malicious compliance. The means don't justify the ends. Malicious compliance is when you obey the rule and cheat the purpose of the rule. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and the act itself has to be good, has to be lawful. So you can't torture people even to save other lives, because the person you're torturing is also made in the image and likeness of God. There are certain acts that are evil in and of themselves, even if done for a good purpose. You see, so those, you have to have all three of them in order to be a good Catholic. And I noticed that they map onto sort of the three approaches you just mentioned: the deontological and the virtue based, and the utilitarian, actually. Because this also will benefit the most people. If everyone's virtuous, that actually will benefit the most people in the long run.
Yeah, I mean...
But if you can train a computer to do something as complicated as recognize a guy do guard duty, isn't it feasible that let's say in 100 years or 200, that there's just enough of a body of continuous learning in the computer realm that the artificial car could actually learn when it's okay to swerve to miss a pedestrian, or to accelerate and to run over one guy to save two guys, or whatever the case may be. I myself don't think it is, but I don't know if it's impossible. It just doesn't seem likely.
I think the problem is you're trying to build virtue ethics from deontological ethics in a sense here.
Yes.
And I'm not sure you'll ever be able to solve. You might be able to get close, but
Here's
thing
the
about
let me use my own example. I think it's like a bureaucracy. If the bureaucracy has really complicated, really intricate rules that cover every possible situation, maybe you can get something approaching like what a person of ordinary prudence could do if they were trying to serve their customers. But the top-down system is never going to be as flexible. It's never going to react with a short logic loop. It's never going to react immediately to you have an angry customer in your face. He's right there.
I think this is the problem. Yeah, you're going to wind up. The trick with virtue ethics is every rule has an exception, and every exception to every rule has an exception, and so on.
And even that rule has an exception. So yeah, you're right.
Like
so,
it's all sort of, there's the right way to do things and stuff, but it's effectively honeycombed through with little exceptions. And if you're trying to build this with deontological approach, the rules are just going to be completely unwieldy and unworkable.
Right. And although I got to say, as a lawyer, you can get a set of written rules that will cover most of your situations most of the time. They just can't deal with the exceptions and the emergencies.
Well, that's what you need a judge for. That's why you have.
That's what you need a judge. That's why you have judges. Now, can you computerize judgment? And I think the answer is no.
Probably not.
I think this AI stuff is just going to turn into a nightmare. I don't see. Even I, who think the drunk driving problem is terrible, I'm not sure that's going to be the solution. But give it 100 years. Who knows?
Well,
I'm skeptical.
I guess we are both pessimistic for how well this is going to work out. So
because in the cartoon, the sorcerer does come back and saves Mickey from his own folly, but that's a cartoon. In real life, it's not going to happen.
So I guess the takeaway message is, if we're going to keep building AIs, nobody but the Catholic Church should build them.
I like that idea because we're very law-oriented. We're very good at the...
At the very least, we need to start a new order dedicated to programming AIs to be virtuous.
Yes, we'll call them the Jesuits. They'll be very good at arguing little nuances of law. So.
I hear lots of bad stories about modern Jesuits.
Yeah, so. Me too. That's why I made a weird face when I said that. So.
Anyway, thank you everybody for joining us. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time. I hope you found this interesting.